The other day, as I was scrolling through Instagram, I came across a reel that piqued my curiosity. It was a conversation between Kate Bowler, an author and prof at Duke Divinity School, and Elizabeth Gilbert of Eat, Pray, Love fame. And they were talking about purpose anxiety. Now, here's what Elizabeth had to say. There is a pathological obsession with making sure that your life has a higher purpose than just having a life, which is already pretty incredible. Like, just having a life is pretty amazing. But that's not good enough. She goes on to talk about the formula that we've been fed, that we all have one unique offering in this life, and we must find out what it is and master it. And then we must not only master it, but monetize it. Because if you don't monetize it, then you're not successful. And then you need to create opportunities for others, and then you need to leave a legacy. And if you aren't able to do all of this, somehow you failed. Well, if this is true, I've failed a lot. My career path has been rather eclectic. I've worked in retail management, as a newspaper reporter, in marketing and admin, and in graphic and media design. And while I've been in ministry for about 15 years now, even that has looked different in various seasons. Children and youth ministry, congregational development, rector of a couple parishes, and now an associate in an incredible team ministry situation. My life has not followed a clearly marked roadmap, and I've been far from the best at anything that I've done. And it has caused me anxiety along the way, because it hasn't looked the way I thought it would. It hasn't looked the way I thought it would, and it hasn't looked the way our North American culture says it ought to look. Pick a path, become the best, make a lot of money, make a name for yourself. This is your purpose. This is success. And the pressure to live into this formula, to follow this roadmap of purpose so that we can fit the mold of making it, fit the mold of success, can be all-consuming, not to mention exhausting. But this formula, it's not true. Now, don't get me wrong. Being good at something isn't a bad thing. Trying and learning and growing isn't a bad thing. Living out a vocation that is meaningful to you can be absolutely rewarding and life-giving, and receiving an equitable wage for the work one does is essential. Yet when we place all of our value, all our purpose in that one thing we do, that we've worked so hard to master, what happens when we can't do whatever it is anymore? Because of injury or illness or changing economies and technology or more pressing priorities? What happens when the path we've been following comes to a halt and we need to veer in a direction that wasn't part of the plan? What comes next? Well, the next day. The next day, John again was standing with two of his friends, and as he watched Jesus walk by, he exclaimed, "Look, here is the Lamb of God." It's important to remember that John is speaking these words in a moment where his life has been turned on its head. Because what he'd been waiting for, the one whom he'd been pointing to for so long, has arrived. But arrived in a way that was both expected and unexpected. And now he's sharing this news with his friends. And his friends, they're curious. They hear what John has to say, and they want to find out more. So they follow Jesus, who turns and engages with them. "What are you looking for?" Jesus asks. To which they reply, "Rabbi, teacher, where are you staying?" Now, one can only imagine what's going on in their minds. They ask Jesus where he's staying, but I bet that they have a million questions going through their head. And so they address Jesus in a way that will hopefully give them the chance to learn more. "Rabbi, teacher," they plead, suggesting that they are ready and eager to learn from him. And Jesus invites them to come and see, to be with him and to remain with him. But in context, this doesn't make any sense. First of all, we know that John the Baptist was a bit of an eccentric who did things differently from the way things were expected to be. He was questioned about his strange ways by those who held religious authority, and he located his ministry in the wilderness, away from the regular places of worship. Still, there were those who were intrigued by what John was up to. They recognized John as someone who had something of importance to say, and they risked aligning themselves with someone whose voice wasn't the most popular around, yet was nonetheless prophetic. But this meant that the group who listened to John were themselves somewhat eclectic, from all walks of life. And it is from among John's friends whom Jesus calls his first followers. John's friends, who we'll learn were fishermen, a common line of work, nothing fancy, not the cream of the crop. And on that day, this is to whom Jesus says, "Come and see." Their lives, they take a completely unexpected turn. They have no idea what's coming next. Still, they follow. All they have to base their decision on is John's testimony. But John is saying that Jesus is the Lamb of God, and that means something for them. And it means something for us. Now, the Lamb of God is some straight-up churchy language, and we know it to be something good. We hear it in our services, in our prayers, in our songs, and we may even recognize it as a title for Jesus. But do we know what it means for us? Without getting into all the intricacies of it, in a nutshell, it means freedom. Jesus, as the Lamb of God, means that whatever is separating us from God, sin, shame, fear, no longer has the power to keep us from God's love. So when the Lamb of God says to us, "Come and see," we are being invited into the way of life. We are being invited into the way of God's love. What then if this is our purpose? To let God love us. We talk a whole lot about us loving God. But what about letting God love us? Receiving God's love, which is freely given for us, not because we've gotten some fancy magic formula right, not because we're the best at any one thing. It's given simply because we are. It's given because we have been created to be loved. And if our purpose is to let God love us, how does that change how we live day in and day out? How does that change the way we see ourselves and the way we see one another? Indeed, all of creation, whom God so loves that Jesus was given for us. Might there even be the freedom to step off the hamster wheel of what we've been told is success and recognize that there is another way? That making space for rest and relationships and connection matters. That it's okay to do things that you're not the best at. That if the plan veers off in a way that we didn't expect, that's okay. That sometimes what we perceive as failure, while hard for sure, might not be the tragedy that we've made it out to be, and can actually give room for something unexpectedly profound, for collaboration and growth, for new ideas to be birthed into life. And if all of this is approached with the purpose of letting God love us, we can only imagine how this may transform us and those around us. Because, my friends, the next day is here. And the Lamb of God is saying to us, "Come and see." Will you come with me?